My presentation begins with a question that aroused my curiosity. One shiny day, a man turns his back to the city he had just assisted to establish and decides to establish another city, a better one. This person was Dr. Yehuda Leib Matmon Cohen, or Matmon Cohen, a resourceful figure in the Hebrew Yishuv in the first third of the 20th century, that is mainly remembered as the founder of Herzliya Hebrew Gymnasium in Tel Aviv in 1905, the building that we see in the end of the street, the beautiful building, that served as the first Hebrew high school in the country. Matmon was a leading figure in the Hebrew language revival and was also one of the founders of Tel Aviv in 1909. Another important, less spoken chapter in his life was his initiative and leadership in the foundation of Ramat Gan, a new garden city near Tel Aviv in 1914, in which he aimed to fulfill a more truthful vision of a Hebrew settlement bathed in greenery. There were three key figures in the development of Ramat Gan as a garden city. All of them take part in my original research on Ramat Gan. This lecture will focus on the founder, Dr. Matmon. The following research aims to illuminate Matmon's unique contribution to the foundation and development of the Ramat Gan based on British garden city model, and to trace the set of ideas and action that has been taken prior to his decision to create a new city a very short time after he participated in the foundation of the first Hebrew city. A curious episode in Matmon's limited documented biography hints on the trigger that might explain his decision to change his priorities and turn his back to the gymnasia in Tel Aviv, and to put his faith in the new city he aimed to found. Allegedly, a botanical garden Matmon struggled to establish in the gymnasia but did not bear fruit, urged him to aspire for a new garden city in which he could fulfill his dream. I identified this sub-question as a missing link in Matmon's involvement in the two cities, and it is also it also opens a window to another research on the history of botanical gardens in Eretz Israel. And the sub-question is, did Matmon's unfulfilled enterprise to establish botanical garden in Gymnasia Herzliya triggered his decisions to build a new garden city? Methodology. The qualitative research is based on historical, ethnographical, and hermeneutical methods, leaned on theories from urban and regional planning, historical and cultural geography, and urban sociology. I'm a proud student, I have to say, of the late Professor Ronnie Ellenblum from the Department of Geography for Historical Geography in the Hebrew University. My initial, I now will take you to a voyage through different archives, since this is the subject of our conference. First, my initial research was focused in the development of Ramat Gan. Thus, empirical data were mainly extracted from Ramat Gan municipality archives, Bet Krinitzi, the former home of Ramat Gan's mythological mayor, became an abbot to Ramat Gan's historical archives. Sources include dozens of municipal historical protocols and diaries presenting the ideological vision of the founders, the principles and decision-making for materializing the garden city model. Second, a more technical data on the planning history was provided by the municipal engineering department, aerial photos, maps, master plans, and architectural conservation portfolios, and also interviews with architects and municipal functionaries. Third, at the next stage, I realized I had to take a step back in time and space and to search Tel Aviv Municipality Archive, who contributed letters and documents of Gymnasia Herzliya. This shed light on the period that preceded the foundation of Ramat Gan. Fourth, The Zionist archive reflected some more views from the gymnasia, and an important correspondence between Matmon and Richard Kaufman, the architect who Matmon hired to plan the new city. I continue with this voyage. Fifth, in the first COVID period, 2 years ago, the only archive I could dig into was a private archive of Dalia Shotland, a Ramat Gan citizen who also wrote academic research on the history of Ramat Gan. And she had the fortune to interview Ivrita Galatsky, the daughter of Matmon, who is no longer among us. 6. The Israel Film Archive provided a live insight into the reality of Ramat Gan as a garden city in the 30s and illustrated its image as a healing town, an image envisioned by Dr. Matmon 2 decades earlier. 7. Gola Utkumat Digital Archive. It enabled additional example, which was not found elsewhere, of a pension to further establish the image of an healing town. 8. 2 months ago, on my way to Gymnasia Herzliya archives, I was very optimistic in the hope to finally find proofs to my missing link. Yet I came too late. Apparently, the whole archive was recently transported to the National Library in Jerusalem. All I could find there was a thesis on Matmon, which contributed some knowledge on his background in philosophy. The end of the voyage, question mark. Still optimistic, I took my chances in the National Library, only to discover that the whole archive was again transported to the Central Zionist Archives. There I learned I had to increase my patience. Since the archive is now close to the public until the work on its registration will be done. Thus, efforts to obtain additional sources and especially to find the map of the botanical garden planned by Matmon are still in progress. Current research. The annals of Ramat Gan as a garden city were written and documented by the municipality and citizens that had been published over the years. Number of diaries and educational books for children. On the last decade, several documentation surveys had been taken prior to conservation projects across the city. This service presented the history of planning of Ramat Gan as a garden city. Yet, in the field of academic writing, Ramat Gan and its development had not been researched enough, and sometimes even have been omitted from the research. As for Dr. Matmon, as influential and enterprising this man was in the history of Ramat Gan and Tel Aviv as well, not much has been written about him, and not many sources are found to shed light on the many questions that remained open. The main academic work on Ramat Gan has been carried out by Tzeir Merouani, who followed the development and decline of Ramat Gan as a garden city. Ramat Gan today, as concluded by Merouani, is a big city far away from the original dream of its founders. Yet Dan Yahav, who carried quantitative research, concluded that based on the impressive repertoire of green spaces at the beginning of the 90s, it does justify the title Garden City. The thesis on Matmon by Chanit Ben-Glas, the only treasure I managed to carry from the gymnasia, verifies my insight that Matmon, despite his influential contribution to the Hebrew language and natural science education, as well as to the foundation of 2 main Hebrew cities, did not receive enough academic research, and our research strove to mend it, centering mainly on his educational enterprises. Dr. Matmon's impressive occurrences reflect his unlimited commitment to the 2 disciplines he valued the most, the Hebrew language and the study of nature. Matmon strove for a close relation with the land and nature of Eretz Israel until his last day. Matmon understood that the second generation did not struggle to ascend to Eretz Israel, but was born here, had to be taught how to be connected to the country spiritually and emotionally. In his seminal treatise, Matmon unfolds his legacy. Are there stronger ties, he says, than the ties of love to the physical body of the land? Those will be born only after the people will return to nature. In his high school, Matmon inspired to train his students not as scholars, mathematicians, and philosophers, of whom the Jewish people is plenty, but as naturalists, tiv'anim. This unique and out-of-order word was probably coined in Hebrew by him to define the new profession disconnected so far from Judaism. Matmon developed a pedagogical philosophy that encouraged teaching in the open air believing that geography and natural history should be taught in the open air outside in a place that, together with the healthy, liberated spirit, the students have a direct contact with natural elements and the sides of landscape. Matmon led his pedagogical agenda in creative ways, such as the proposal to carry out a flower festival in the streets. The neighborhood was not eager to cooperate, as reflected in this correspondence between an angry neighbor to the committee of Achuzat Bayit. The neighbor expressed his fear of a potential scandal if the students would lead the flower festival. Following the gymnasia's relocation to Tel Aviv in 1910, Matmon conceived the idea of erecting a spacious botanical garden on the site. For that cause, he traveled to Europe to study different examples of botanical gardens and was especially inspired by Berlin's garden. Upon his return, he suggested an unusual shape for his garden, a huge map of Eretz Israel, 89 meters long and 30 meters wide. His enterprise was supported by the famous botanist Otto Warburg and the agronomist Aaron Aronson, and even obtained funding by a donor lady, yet it did not bear fruits. The plot that was initially designated for the garden was reallocated in 1912 for new dormitories to accommodate students from abroad. Instead, a modest vegetable garden was erected in the high school skirts. This unfulfilled project was considered as one of Matmon's initial motivation to establish new garden city, in which he could realize his dream. In the municipal master plan from 1966 of Ramat Gan, Matmon was presented as the city founder who aimed to establish a great botanical garden for Gimnasia Herzliya in this new settlement. The pioneer enterprise of Dr. Matmon is omitted from the annals of the Zionist botanical gardens. Only 2 decades later was the first botanical garden erected in Mikve, Israel. The second botanical garden was established in Mount Scopus in 1931 by Dr. Alexander Egg. When I found out that Egg was a former student in Gimnasia Herzliya, apparently in the first class, I asked myself about his sources of influence and whether in some way he fulfilled his teacher's dream. The preference of buildings on the expense of gardens, as reflected in the case of Gimnasia failed garden project, seems to be considered by Matmon as reflecting Tel Aviv's limited potential to fulfill the ideal of a city immersed in gardens and open spaces. As in the episode of the Flower Festival, the members of Achuzat Bayit did not seem to care a lot about trees and flowers and did not see any need for the neighborhood to have a public gardens. What did Matmon see in Tel Aviv in the year he decided to found a new garden city? Matmon's writing and later biographies and historiographies demonstrates his growing recognition in Tel Aviv's limited potential to fulfill the ideal of a city immersed in gardens and open spaces. And so, in 1914, Matmon assembled colleagues from Herzliya Gymnasium, and together they sought to materialize Howard's model in a new settlement that would serve its loyal realization, in contrast to what they considered as a fulfillment in Tel Aviv. The land that was about to be purchased was located on a hilly area at the west bank of Musrara, today Ayalon Valley, which marked the future border between the new settlement to Tel Aviv. In a declaration of intent made by Matmon, he identified the proposed site's physical attributes as having a promising potential to assist the flourishing of the new garden city. In addition, the beautiful scenes reflected from the hills and the pleasant climate might also carry an economic potential as a touristic and recuperative site. The fresh air on the hills and its delighting sights, together with the improvements that still will be carried by the effort of the citizens, might turn it also to a place of summer rest for many of the city's citizens. איך אני עם הזמן? יש לי עוד זמן או שנגמר? טוב, אני ממשיכה בינתיים. Matmon's appeal to Richard Kaufman, in September 1921 was compatible with the association's aim to build a settlement based on our concept. Kaufman was by then... נגמר לי הזמן?
כן, אם תוכלי לארוז ולסיים.
לארוז ולסיים. אז אני רק אסיים פה בהתכתבות הזאת עם קאופמן, וזהו, בסדר? Kaufman was by then known by his central involvement in implementations of Howard's model in actual settlements in Europe and Eretz Israel. A letter sent from David to Dr. Matmon, David was one of the members of the Irganim Association, in 1921 revealed some of the decision-making between the association and Kaufman regarding the design principles according to the Garden City model. אוקיי, אני אדלג על זה, ונגיע לבסוף רק לתוכנית, אני חושבת. In this plan, we can see how they fulfill the principles of the Garden City model, and also took the number 8 in this plan is the Abraham Garden. Today, it was planned to be a botanical garden, and they asked specifically for 10 dunams to assign for this garden. They might be the 10 dunams that weren't succeed to be erected in Gymnasium Herzliya. Thank you very much.